One second, Naomi Whitaker stood on that sun-baked platform clutching her travel bag, heart hammering with hope. The next, she watched her future ride away without a single word, left behind, unwanted, humiliated in front of an entire frontier town that would never forget what they'd witnessed. But this isn't a story about a woman who gave up. This is about survival, redemption, and a love forged in the brutal Arizona desert that would silence every cruel whisper. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The train lurched to a stop with a metal shriek that sent dust swirling across the Red Mesa platform. Naomi Whitaker pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the frontier town materialize through the haze like something from a fever dream. Wooden buildings lined a single dirt road. Horses tied to hitching posts swished their tails against flies. A water tower stood crooked against the relentless blue sky. She'd traveled 1,800 miles for this moment. "Red Mesa!" the conductor called, swinging open the car door. "Last stop!" Naomi stood carefully, steadying herself against the seat back. Her left leg throbbed after 3 days of sitting, the familiar ache she'd learned to ignore spreading from hip to ankle. She smoothed her navy traveling dress, adjusted her bonnet, and lifted her carpet bag with hands that trembled despite her best efforts. "He won't care," she told herself, repeating the words she'd whispered every night since leaving Philadelphia. Travis said the leg didn't matter. He said he wanted a strong woman, not a perfect one. The letters were tucked in her bag, 17 of them, each one read so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. Travis Boone had written about his ranch, about the Arizona Territory's harsh beauty, about needing a partner who understood hard work. When Naomi had finally confessed about her damaged leg, the childhood fever that left it twisted and weak, he'd written back within 2 weeks. "I'm not looking for a porcelain doll to sit in a parlor," his letter had said. "I need a woman with spine. If you can manage a household and don't mind the dust, we'll do fine together." She'd cried reading those words, not from sadness, but relief so profound it had left her shaking. Now, stepping down onto the platform, Naomi felt the Arizona heat slam into her like a physical force. It was nothing like Philadelphia's humid summers. This was dry, merciless, the kind of heat that sucked moisture from your mouth and made your eyes sting. She blinked, searching the sparse crowd for a tall man with dark hair and broad shoulders, the description Travis had provided. A few townspeople lingered near the general store across the street, their conversations dying as they noticed her. A woman in a faded calico dress elbowed her companion, both of them staring with undisguised curiosity. 2 men loading supplies onto a wagon stopped mid-lift to watch. Naomi's stomach tightened. Small towns were the same everywhere. Strangers were entertainment. "Miss Whitaker?" She turned, hope flaring. A young man approached, maybe 19 or 20, with sun-bleached hair and a nervous smile. He held his hat in both hands, twisting the brim. "Yes, I'm Naomi Whitaker. Are you—" "Jimmy Hayes, ma'am. I work at the telegraph office." He glanced past her shoulder, then back, his smile fading slightly. "Mr. Boone asked me to watch for the train. He said to tell you he's running a bit late. Ranch business. Should be here any minute." "Oh." Relief and disappointment mixed uneasily in her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." "Jimmy's fine, ma'am." He shifted his weight, still not quite meeting her eyes. "Can I help you with your bag? There's shade by the station house if you want to wait there." "I can manage, thank you." But when she took her first step, her weak leg nearly buckled. She'd been sitting too long, and the limb always needed time to remember how to bear weight properly. Naomi caught herself against the platform railing, keeping her expression neutral even as heat flooded her cheeks. Jimmy Hayes pretended not to notice, suddenly very interested in something across the street. She made it to the shade, each step deliberate and measured. The watching townspeople had returned to their conversations, but Naomi felt their awareness like insects crawling on her skin. She'd spent 24 years perfecting the art of moving through crowds without drawing attention to her limp, but 3 days on a train had left her clumsy. 15 minutes passed, then 30. The sun climbed higher, turning the platform into a griddle. Naomi's traveling dress stuck to her back. She'd drunk the last of her water an hour before the train arrived, and her throat felt coated in dust. Jimmy Hayes had disappeared, probably back to his telegraph office. The townspeople had dispersed to wherever people went in this heat. She was alone with her carpet bag and her growing doubt. At 45 minutes, Hoofbeats finally echoed down the main street. Naomi straightened, heart hammering. She touched her bonnet, checking for loose hair, and brushed dust from her skirt. First impressions mattered. She'd learned that the hard way back in Philadelphia, watching potential suitors' faces change when they noticed her uneven gait. But Travis knew. Travis understood. This would be different. The rider came into view, a man on a big sorrel horse, sitting the saddle like he'd been born there. Tall, just like the letters described, dark hair visible beneath his hat, strong jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore work clothes, dusty from riding, and for a moment Naomi's breath caught. That's him. That's Travis. The horse slowed to a walk, then stopped 20 feet from the platform. Travis Boone looked at her, really looked, his gaze moving from her face down to her travel-stained dress, and then his expression changed. Naomi saw it happen, saw his eyes track to where her skirt couldn't quite hide the way she stood with more weight on her right leg. Saw something in his face close off, like a door slamming shut. The transformation took maybe 3 seconds, but those seconds stretched into something terrible and infinite. He didn't dismount, didn't speak, just sat there on his horse, staring at her leg. "Mr. Boone?" Naomi's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm Naomi Whitaker. I'm so glad to finally, No?" The single word hit like a slap. "I'm sorry." She took a step forward, confusion and the first curl of fear mixing in her gut. "I don't understand. I know who you are." His voice was flat, without inflection, cold. "And I know what you are." Heat that had nothing to do with the sun flooded Naomi's face. Across the street she saw movement, people emerging from the general store, sensing drama. The woman in calico had stopped sweeping her porch. 2 men paused in loading their wagon. Everyone was watching again. "You said in your letter that my leg wouldn't matter," Naomi said quietly, fighting to keep her voice from shaking. "You said—" "I said a lot of things before I knew." Travis turned his horse, the animal dancing sideways. "I run cattle, Miss Whitaker. I need a wife who can keep up with ranch work, not someone who will be laid up every time there's real labor to do." "I can work. I've been working my whole life. You can go back where you came from." The words landed like stones. Naomi felt her throat close, felt the familiar burn of tears she absolutely would not shed. Not here. Not in front of this man who was looking at her like she was damaged merchandise someone had tried to pass off as whole. "I spent every penny I had getting here," she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "I sold everything I owned. I don't have money for return passage." Something flickered in Travis Boone's face. Guilt, maybe, or discomfort, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "That's not my problem." He pulled his horse around completely, presenting her with his back. "There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Chen takes in laundry and mending. Maybe you can work something out with her." "Wait!" Naomi moved forward, her leg dragging slightly, and saw Travis flinch at the sight. The flinch hurt worse than his words. "Please, just let me explain. I can show you I'm capable. I've seen enough." He kicked his horse into a trot, not looking back. Naomi stood frozen, watching him ride away down the dusty street. Watching her future disappear into the shimmering heat waves. Watching everything she'd hoped for and dreamed about turn to ash. The silence stretched. Then, like a dam breaking, the whispers started. "Did you see that? Poor thing traveled all this way." "Well, you can't blame him, can you? Ranch life's hard enough without—" "Shh. She'll hear you." Naomi turned slowly, meeting the eyes of the watching townspeople. The woman in calico looked away first, then the men at the wagon. One by one, they found other things to occupy their attention, embarrassed to be caught witnessing someone else's humiliation. She stood there for a long moment, carpetbag at her feet, bonnet crooked from the train's jostling, dress dusty and sticking to her back. The sun beat down mercilessly. Somewhere a dog barked. A shutter banged in the wind. "Get off the platform," she told herself. "Don't just stand here like a fool." Her legs didn't want to move. The weak one throbbed, and the good one felt like water. But standing still meant giving up, and Naomi Whitaker had not traveled 1,800 miles to give up on the platform where her dreams died. She picked up her carpetbag, ignored the way her hand shook, and started walking. Not back to the train. There was no train to take her anywhere. Not to the boarding house Travis had mentioned, not yet. Just walking, away from the stairs and the whispers, toward the edge of town where the buildings gave way to scrub brush and endless desert. Each step hurt. The weak leg wanted to buckle. Sweat ran down her back and between her shoulder blades. Her throat felt like sandpaper. But she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and if she let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened, she'd collapse right there in the dust. 3 blocks. 4. The whispers faded behind her. The town's noise, horses, wagon wheels, conversation grew distant. Naomi found herself on a rutted road that led out into the scrubland, red earth stretching to meet burnt blue sky. She stopped finally, legs trembling, and let the carpetbag drop. Then, and only then, did she let herself feel it. The humiliation, the fear, the crushing weight of being utterly, completely alone in a place where she knew no one and had nowhere to go. Naomi sank down onto a sun-baked rock at the roadside, pulled her knees up as much as her bad leg would allow, and put her face in her hands. She didn't cry. Tears seemed too small for what she felt. This was bigger than crying. This was the complete destruction of every plan she'd made, every hope she'd nursed during those long miles on the train. She told herself that Travis Boone was different, that he'd meant what he wrote, that someone, finally, would see past the limp to the person underneath. Stupid. So stupid to believe him. "You all right, miss?" Naomi's head jerked up. An old man stood a few feet away, leading a mule loaded with supplies. He had the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in the sun, and his eyes were kind. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Just resting. Long way to come for resting." He nodded at her carpetbag. "You that bride who came in on the morning train?" Of course he knew. Everyone would know by now. Small-town gossip traveled faster than telegraph wires. "I was," Naomi said. "I'm not anymore." The old man made a sympathetic noise. "Saw Boone ride past a bit ago, looking meaner than a snake in a cactus patch. Figured it didn't go well." "It didn't go at all. His loss." The man scratched his mule's ears. "Travis Boone's got a good ranch, but he's got his father's pride and his mother's coldness. Probably did you a favor, if you want my honest opinion." Naomi almost laughed. Almost. "A favor would have been finding out before I spent everything I had to get here." "Fair point." He studied her for a moment. "You got anywhere to go? Anyone in town?" "No, someone mentioned a boarding house." "Mrs. Chen's place. She's decent enough if you can pay. If you can't—" He shrugged. "Well, Red Mesa's not known for charity." The reality of her situation settled heavier. No money for return passage. Barely enough coins in her purse for a few nights' lodging, and that was if the boarding house was cheap. Then what? She had no family back in Philadelphia who'd take her in. The spinster aunt who'd raised her had died 2 years ago, leaving Naomi with nothing but the furniture she'd sold to buy her train ticket. "I'll manage," she said, because what else could she say? The old man didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "Mrs. Chen's place is back toward the center of town, across from the general store. Can't miss it. Blue shutters, front porch with a swing." "Thank you." "Good luck, miss. You'll need it." He continued on with his mule, leaving Naomi alone again with the sun and the dust and the complete absence of options. She sat there for another 10 minutes, gathering what remained of her courage. Then she stood, picked up her carpetbag, and started the walk back into Red Mesa. Her legs screamed protest with each step, but she ignored it. Pain was familiar, pain she could handle. It was the pity in people's eyes that made her want to scream. Mrs. Chen's boarding house was easy to find, exactly where the old man had said. The blue shutters looked faded in the harsh sunlight, and the porch swing hung slightly crooked, but the building seemed solid enough. Naomi climbed the 3 steps carefully, knocked on the door, and waited. The woman who answered was small and neat, with black hair pulled into a severe bun and sharp eyes that took in everything from Naomi's dusty dress to her carpetbag to the way she favored her right leg. "Mrs. Chen?" "That's right. You're the Boone bride." Not a question. "I was. Now I just need a room, if you have one available." Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes might have been sympathy. $1 a night, meals included, laundry's extra. Naomi did quick mental arithmetic. She had $7 in her purse. 7 nights. assuming she ate nothing but what came with the room and needed no laundry done. 7 nights to figure out what came next. I'll take it. Mrs. Chen stepped aside. Rooms at the top of the stairs, second door. Privy's out back. Supper's at 6, breakfast at 7. You miss it, you go hungry. Understood. The room was small. A single bed with a faded quilt, a washstand, a chair, and a window overlooking the main street. Naomi set her carpet bag down and sat on the bed, testing the mattress. Lumpy, but it would do. Through the window, she could see the general store, the telegraph office, the saloon with its swinging doors. She could see the street Travis Boone had ridden down, disappearing into the heat shimmer. She could see the life of Red Mesa continuing without her, indifferent to her presence or her pain. 7 days, she thought. 7 days to find work. 7 days to figure out how to survive in a place that doesn't want me. She should unpack, should wash the train dust from her face and hands, should plan, strategize, do something productive with the remaining daylight. Instead, Naomi lay down on the lumpy mattress, stared at the ceiling with its water stains and cracks, and finally let herself cry. Not loud, wrenching sobs, but silent tears that leaked from the corners of her eyes and dampened the pillow. She cried for the future that had evaporated before it began, for the humiliation on that platform, for every time someone had looked at her leg and decided she was less than whole. She cried until she had no tears left, until her eyes burned and her throat ached. Then she lay there in the growing shadows, listening to the sounds of Red Mesa settling into evening. Horses, voices, a piano playing somewhere, laughter from the saloon. The shadows lengthened. The room grew darker. Naomi didn't move. When full dark finally came, she got up, lit the lamp Mrs. Chen had left on the washstand, and poured water from the pitcher into the basin. She washed her face, unpinned her hair, and changed into her nightgown. She hung her traveling dress on the room's single hook, smoothing the wrinkles as much as possible. Tomorrow, she told herself, she'd face whatever came next. Tomorrow she'd start looking for work. Tomorrow she'd prove Travis Boone wrong about what she was capable of. But tonight, she just needed to survive until morning. Naomi turned down the lamp and climbed into bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Chen moving around downstairs, the sounds of other boarders settling in for the night. The piano in the saloon kept playing, a jaunty tune that felt obscene against her misery. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, her mind replayed every moment on that platform. The way Travis's expression had changed, the coldness in his voice, the flinch when she'd moved toward him. I know what you are, what she was. Broken, damaged, not worth the trouble. Naomi turned her face into the pillow and wished she could disappear entirely. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Naomi woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of frying bacon drifting up from below. Her eyes felt swollen from crying, and every muscle ached from the train journey and yesterday's emotional devastation. She lay there for a moment, disoriented, before memory crashed back. Red Mesa, Travis Boone, the platform. Everything gone wrong. She sat up slowly, her bad legs stiff from sleeping in one position too long. The room looked shabbier in daylight, but it was shelter, and she still had 6 more nights paid for. 6 days to figure out the rest of her life. Breakfast in Mrs. Chen's dining room was a silent affair. 3 other boarders sat at the table, 2 men who looked like ranch hands and an older woman who kept her eyes on her plate. No one spoke. Mrs. Chen served scrambled eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee without comment. Naomi ate because she needed the fuel, not because she tasted anything. When she finished, she thanked Mrs. Chen and escaped back to her room. She needed work. That was the immediate problem. No work meant no money, and no money meant, well, she couldn't think about that yet. The obvious place to start was the general store. Naomi changed into her second-best dress, pinned her hair carefully, and made her way downstairs and across the street. The store was dim after the bright sunlight, smelling of leather and coffee and dust. A middle-aged man stood behind the counter, sorting through a ledger. He looked up when the bell above the door jingled. "Help you, miss?" "I'm looking for work," Naomi said directly. "Any kind of work. Clerking, stocking shelves, cleaning. I'm good with figures and I'm reliable." The man's eyes flicked to her leg. She'd known they would, and his expression turned apologetic. Sorry, miss. Business isn't good enough to take on help right now. It was a lie. She could see it in the way he wouldn't meet her eyes, hear it in the forced regret in his voice, but arguing would accomplish nothing. Thank you anyway, she said, and left. The telegraph office was next. Jimmy Hayes looked uncomfortable the moment she walked in. I don't do the hiring, Miss Whitaker. Mr. Patterson does, and he's particular about, well, he likes things a certain way. Translation, he wouldn't hire a woman with a limp. The restaurant said they had a full staff. The hotel claimed they weren't looking for anyone. The seamstress took one look at Naomi's leg and said she needed someone who could work the treadle sewing machine for long hours. By noon, Naomi had tried every business on the main street and received the same answer in various forms. No. Sometimes polite, sometimes not, but always no. She sat on a bench outside the hotel, fighting despair. The sun beat down mercilessly. Her leg throbbed. She had 6 days of lodging left and no prospects. There has to be something. Someone in this town needs help. You're wasting your time. Naomi looked up. A woman stood nearby, maybe 30 years old, with red hair pinned under a bonnet and a dress that had seen better days. Her face was lined from sun and hard living, but her eyes were sharp. Excuse me? Looking for respectable work in Red Mesa. The woman sat down on the bench without invitation. You won't find it, not with your leg. Maybe not even without it, being a stranger and all, but definitely not with it. The bluntness should have stung, but Naomi was too tired for offense. Then what do you suggest? Depends what you're willing to do. The woman studied her. You're the one Boone left on the platform yesterday, right? News travels fast. Small town, not much else to talk about, she paused. Name's Ruth. I work at the saloon. Naomi understood immediately what kind of work that meant. I see. Not judging, Ruth said quickly. Just telling you reality. Places like Red Mesa, they don't have much use for women who can't do heavy labor, ranch work, farm work. That's what matters out here. Everything else is just... She shrugged. Is there really nothing? Ruth was quiet for a moment, thinking. There might be one thing, probably nothing, but you hear about Cole Mercer? Naomi shook her head. Rancher. Lives about 5 miles outside town, up in the foothills. Used to run a decent operation, but his wife died 3, maybe 4 years ago. Took it hard. Let the place go to hell. Stopped coming into town. Some folks say he's half wild now, living out there like an animal. Ruth leaned closer. Word is he's sick. Real sick. Someone saw smoke from his chimney 2 weeks ago, then nothing. Might be dead already, might not. But if he's alive, he probably needs help. And no one's gone to check on him? Ruth laughed, sharp and bitter. Why would they? Cole Mercer made it real clear he didn't want company, ran off the last person who tried to help with a rifle. Before that, he threw a lantern at the preacher. Man wants to die alone out there. Folks figure that's his business. But if he's sick, then he'll die and someone will eventually go claim his property. Ruth stood up, brushing dust from her skirt. I'm just telling you because you seem desperate, and desperate people do things others won't. You want to try your luck with Mercer. His ranch is north of here. Follow the main road until you see a dead cottonwood split by lightning, then head west on the trail. Can't miss it. It'll be the one that looks abandoned. Why are you telling me this? Ruth's expression softened slightly. Because I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go. And because maybe you're tough enough to handle a half-feral cowboy, or maybe he's in such bad shape he won't even notice you're there until you've made yourself useful. Either way, it's a chance. More than you'll get anywhere else in Red Mesa. She walked away before Naomi could respond, disappearing into the midday crowd. Naomi sat on the bench, mind racing. 5 miles to a dying man's ranch. A man who'd threatened people with weapons. A man everyone in town had written off. It was insane. Dangerous. Possibly suicidal. It was also the only option she had. She stood up, ignoring the protest from her leg, and started walking back to Mrs. Chen's boarding house. She had preparations to make. If she was going to walk 5 miles into the desert to save a stranger's life, or get herself killed trying, she needed supplies. The walk took 3 hours. Naomi had left at first light, carrying a canteen of water Mrs. Chen had grudgingly sold her, a small bag of basic medical supplies bought with precious coins, and enough food for 2 days. She wore her oldest dress and her sturdy boots, and she'd wrapped her bad leg tightly to give it extra support. The trail Ruth described was easy to find. The dead cottonwood stood like a skeletal finger pointing at the sky, and the western path was clear despite being overgrown with brush. What Ruth hadn't mentioned was how desolate it would feel. The town disappeared quickly behind hills and scrub, leaving Naomi alone with the sun and the silence. No birds sang, no animals moved in the brush, just heat and dust and the sound of her own labored breathing. Her legs started complaining after the first mile. By the second, it was screaming. She stopped to rest when she had to, sipping water sparingly, then forced herself to continue. If he's already dead, this is all for nothing. If he's alive and shoots you, it's worse than nothing. But there was no going back. Red Mesa held nothing for her except slow starvation or choices she wouldn't make. At least this direction held possibility, however slim. The ranch appeared like a mirage in the afternoon heat. Buildings shimmered at the end of a long, rutted drive, a house, a barn, corrals empty of livestock. Everything looked abandoned, left to rot under the merciless sun. Naomi stopped at the edge of the property, studying it. No smoke from the chimney, no horses in the corral, no signs of life at all. He's dead. You walked 3 hours to find a corpse. But she'd come this far, might as well be sure. She started up the drive, each step careful, watching for movement. Her hand clutched the bag of supplies like a talisman. The closer she got, the worse the ranch looked. Fence posts tilted at drunken angles. The barn door hung from one hinge. Weeds choked what might have once been a garden. The house was small, just 3 rooms visible from the outside. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. The porch sagged in the middle. Naomi climbed the steps slowly, testing each board before putting her weight on it. The front door was closed but not locked. She knocked, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. Nothing. She knocked again. "Hello, Mr. Mercer. My name is Naomi Whitaker. I heard you might need help." Silence stretched. Then, faintly, a sound from inside. A moan, maybe. Or the wind. She couldn't tell. Naomi tried the door. It swung open with a creak that made her wince. The smell hit her immediately. Unwashed body, sickness, and something worse. She covered her nose and mouth, waiting for her eyes to adjust to the dimness. The front room was a disaster. Furniture overturned. Dishes piled on every surface, crusty with old food. Dirt and debris covering the floor. And in the corner, on a narrow bed shoved against the wall, a shape under a blanket. Naomi stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. "Mr. Mercer?" The shape didn't move. She crossed the room, stepping over broken crockery and what looked like a shattered picture frame. Up close, she could see him now. A man, unconscious or asleep, half buried in filthy blankets. His face was gaunt, shadowed with weeks of stubble. His hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. She reached out carefully and touched his shoulder, burning hot. "Mr. Mercer, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. They were blue, she noticed distantly, like the desert sky, but clouded with fever, unseen. "Water," he croaked. "Please." Naomi didn't hesitate. She found a relatively clean cup, filled it from her canteen, and lifted his head to help him drink. He gulped desperately, water running down his chin. When the cup was empty, his eyes found hers for a moment, clear enough to register confusion. "My name's Naomi. I'm here to help. Can you tell me where it hurts?" His hand moved weakly to his right side. Naomi pulled back the blanket carefully, trying not to breathe through her nose. His shirt was stiff with dried blood and pus. When she peeled it back, she found the source, a deep gash in his side, infected and festering, probably from a week or more of neglect. "Steer," Cole mumbled, eyes closing again. "Got me. Waited too long." He passed out before finishing the sentence. Naomi sat back, assessing. This was bad. Worse than bad. The infection had spread. She could see red streaks radiating from the wound. He needed a doctor, needed medicine she didn't have, needed care she wasn't qualified to give. But he also needed help now, or he'd be dead by morning. She looked around the filthy room, at the dying man on the bed, at the impossible task ahead of her. Then she set down her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. The first thing Naomi did was open every window in the house. Fresh air wouldn't cure infection, but it might make the room breathable enough that she could work without gagging. The curtains were so caked with dust they crumbled when she touched them. Sunlight flooded in, revealing the full extent of the disaster. Cole Mercer hadn't just let the ranch go to hell. He'd let himself go with it. She found a water pump behind the house, rusted but functional, and filled every pot and pan she could salvage from the wreckage of the kitchen. Back inside, she got a fire going in the stove. Surprisingly, there was wood stacked by the back door, evidence that at some point Cole had still been functional enough to prepare for winter. While water heated, Naomi cleared space around the bed, sweeping debris into piles she'd deal with later. Every movement made her bad leg throb, but she ignored it. Pain was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Cole hadn't stirred since passing out. His breathing was shallow, rapid. The fever radiated off him in waves. When the water boiled, Naomi poured it into a basin, added a splash of whiskey she'd found in the kitchen, the only antiseptic available, and gathered the cleanest rags she could find. She sat on the edge of the bed and began cutting away Cole's shirt. The fabric stuck to the wound. She had to soak it loose, peeling carefully, trying not to cause more damage. Cole moaned but didn't wake. The gash beneath was worse than she'd thought, deep, edges blackened, the surrounding skin hot and swollen. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. "This is going to hurt." She cleaned the wound as thoroughly as she could, using the whiskey-soaked rags to remove pus and dead tissue. Cole's body jerked with each touch, but he remained unconscious. Probably for the best. If he'd been awake, the pain would have been unbearable. It took an hour. By the end, Naomi's hands shook and sweat ran down her back despite the open windows. The wound looked better, cleaner at least, but the red streaks of infection still spread across his ribs. She had no medicine for that, no doctor's knowledge. All she could do was keep it clean and hope his body could fight off the rest. She bandaged him with strips torn from the least filthy sheet she could find, then covered him with a blanket that didn't smell like death. His fever still raged, so she soaked another cloth in cool water and laid it across his forehead. Only then did she let herself sit back, exhausted. The sun was setting. She'd been working for hours without rest, and her leg felt like it might buckle if she stood again. But there was more to do. The house was still a disaster, and Cole would need food if he woke up. Naomi forced herself to her feet and surveyed the kitchen. The stove worked. That was something. She found flour, salt, a few withered potatoes in a sack, and some jerky so hard it could probably be used as a weapon. Not much, but enough to make a thin broth. While it simmered, she started cleaning. Dishes first, washing them outside at the pump because the indoor basin was beyond saving. Then the floor, sweeping years of accumulated dirt and debris out the front door. Then the table, the chairs, the shelves. Her hands turned red and raw. Her back ached. The bad leg screamed with each trip outside to dump dirty water or retrieve clean. But she kept working because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant acknowledging how insane this was. She was alone in the desert with a dying stranger who might wake up violent. She had no way to get help if things went wrong. No one in Red Mesa knew where she was, and no one would come looking. If Cole Mercer died, she'd be stranded here with a corpse. If he lived but decided he didn't want her help, she'd be back where she started, broke, alone, and running out of options. But those were tomorrow's problems. Tonight, she just needed to keep him alive. By full dark, the house looked almost livable. Not clean, that would take days, but functional. The worst of the filth was gone. The windows let in cool night air. The fire in the stove warmed the room without making it stifling. Naomi checked on Cole. Still unconscious, still burning with fever. She got more water into him, a few spoonfuls at a time, supporting his head so he wouldn't choke. He swallowed reflexively, eyes moving beneath closed lids. The broth was ready. She tried to wake him enough to eat, but he was too far gone. Instead, she ate a bowl herself, forcing down the tasteless liquid because she needed the strength. Then she found a relatively clean corner of the room, spread her coat on the floor, and lay down. She should stay alert, watch Cole in case his condition changed. But exhaustion pulled her under within minutes, and she slept hard and dreamless until dawn. Morning brought no improvement. Cole's fever raged on, and he didn't wake even when Naomi changed his bandages. The wound looked slightly better, less angry, less seeping, but the red streaks remained. She spent the day working. scrubbing the bedroom until it was clean enough that she could move Cole to a real bed instead of the corner cot, washing every piece of fabric in the house that wasn't completely ruined, inventorying the pantry and finding it even more sparse than she'd thought. He would need real food soon, meat, vegetables, things that would help him heal. But that required either hunting, impossible for her, or a trip back to Red Mesa, which meant leaving him alone for hours. Neither option was good. On the third day, Cole's fever finally broke. Naomi woke before dawn to check on him and found his eyes open, tracking her movement across the room. She froze, suddenly aware of how this must look. A strange woman in his house, him helpless in bed. "You're awake," she said carefully, keeping her distance. "How do you feel?" Cole stared at her for a long moment. His voice when he spoke was rough, barely above a whisper. "Like I got trampled." "Who are you?" "Naomi Whitaker. I told you before, but you were unconscious. You've been sick for 3 days." 3 days? He tried to sit up, made it about 6 inches, and fell back with a groan. "What happened?" "You had an infected wound in your side. Still do, actually, though it's better than it was. Do you remember how you got it?" "Steer. Tried to doctor him. Got gored for my trouble." His eyes closed. "Stupid." "Very." Naomi moved closer, testing his reaction. When he didn't flinch away or reach for a weapon, she sat on the chair beside the bed. "When did it happen?" "Week ago? Maybe more. Lost track." He looked at her again, really seeing her this time. "Why are you here?" "I needed somewhere to go. Red Mesa wasn't working out." "So you walked into the desert to nurse a stranger?" "When you put it that way, it sounds insane." "It is insane." But something in his expression wasn't quite anger. Confusion, maybe. Disbelief. "You could have died out here." "I was going to die in Red Mesa anyway. At least this way, I'd die trying." Cole made a sound that might have been a laugh if he'd had the strength. "You're either brave or crazy." "Probably both." Naomi stood. "Are you hungry?" "I made broth." "Not sure my stomach can handle it." "You need to try. You've barely eaten in days." She brought him a bowl and helped him sit up enough to manage a few spoonfuls. He kept them down, which was progress. After a few minutes, he waved her away. "Enough. I'll just bring it back up." Naomi set the bowl aside. "I changed your bandages yesterday. I should do it again, check for infection." "I can do it myself." "You can barely lift your head. Don't be stubborn." He looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. "Fine, but turn around while I get my shirt off." "I've already seen everything while cleaning your wound." That was different. I was unconscious. The absurdity of modesty after 3 days of intimate medical care almost made her laugh, but she turned around anyway. Men and their pride. She heard him struggle with the shirt, heard his sharp intake of breath when movement pulled at the wound. "Done," he said finally. The wound looked better. The edges were healing, the redness fading. Naomi cleaned it gently, applied fresh whiskey, which made Cole hiss through his teeth, and rebandaged it with strips she'd boiled clean. "You know what you're doing," he said, watching her work. "Not really. I'm making it up as I go." Could have fooled me. When she finished, she helped him back into a clean shirt, one of his own that she'd washed and mended. He moved slowly, still weak, but more alert than he'd been. "The house," he said suddenly. "It's clean. Some of it. The rest is still a disaster." "I didn't ask you to clean. You didn't ask me to save your life either, but here we are." Naomi met his eyes. "If it bothers you, I'll stop." "But I was going to go crazy sitting here watching you sleep, so I worked. Sue me." Cole looked away first. I'm not trying to be ungrateful. I just don't understand why you're doing this." "I told you, I needed somewhere to go." "And when I'm better? What then?" It was a fair question, one Naomi hadn't let herself think about too hard. "I don't know, but that's a problem for when you're not dying anymore." He was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly she almost missed it. "Thank you." Over the next week, Cole grew stronger. Not quickly. Infection had taken a serious toll, but steadily. He graduated from broth to actual food, started sitting up without help, eventually managed to stand and take a few steps around the room. Naomi kept working. The house came together piece by piece. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, repaired what could be repaired, and discarded what couldn't. She found a garden plot behind the house, choked with weeds but salvageable, and spent an entire day clearing it. Her leg hated every minute. By evening, she could barely walk. But she'd learned long ago to push through pain, to make her body do what needed doing regardless of how it protested. Cole watched her sometimes, from the doorway or the porch where he'd sit when his strength allowed. He didn't say much, but his eyes followed her movements with something that might have been confusion or might have been something else. On the 8th day, he was strong enough to walk outside without help. Naomi found him standing by the empty corral, staring at the broken fences. "This place looks like hell," he said when she approached. "It looked worse when I got here." "That's not saying much." He turned to her. "You've been here over a week, working yourself into the ground. For what?" "I told you. Yeah, you needed somewhere to go. I get that. But this?" He gestured at the ranch. "This is more than just finding shelter. You're trying to fix everything." Naomi looked at the ranch, at the work still needing done. The fences that needed mending, the barn that needed repairs, the garden that needed planting. It was overwhelming, impossible, too much for one woman with a bad leg and a man barely recovered from near death. "I don't know how to just sit still," she said finally. "I've spent my whole life having to prove I'm useful despite this." She tapped her bad leg. "If I stop working, people decide I'm not worth keeping around." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Is that what happened in Red Mesa? Someone decided you weren't worth keeping?" She'd told him the basics, that a potential marriage hadn't worked out, that the town had no work for her. But not the details. Not the humiliation of Travis Boone riding away, or the way everyone had watched it happen. Something like that. Whoever he was, he's an idiot. The words were simple, matter of fact, but they hit Naomi harder than she expected. She blinked against sudden tears, angry at herself for the reaction. "You don't know that. You don't know anything about me. I know you walked 5 miles into the desert to help a stranger everyone else had written off. I know you've been working yourself half to death for a week and haven't asked for anything in return. That's more than most people would do." He paused. "So yeah, whoever didn't want you is an idiot." Naomi didn't trust herself to speak. She nodded once and headed back toward the house, needing distance before she did something embarrassing like cry in front of him. But Cole's words stayed with her through the rest of the day, warming something that had been cold since the moment Travis Boone rode away. That night, they ate together at the kitchen table, the first real meal since Naomi had arrived. She'd managed to catch 2 scraggly chickens that had been hiding in the barn and made a stew that was more vegetables than meat, but filling nonetheless. "This is good," Cole said, and sounded surprised. "Don't get used to it. This is the last of the potatoes." "There's a root cellar under the barn. Might be something left." "I'll check tomorrow." Naomi paused. "You know, eventually we need to talk about supplies. The pantry's almost empty." "We?" The word hung between them. Naomi felt her face heat. "I meant you. You need supplies." Cole set down his spoon. "Did you mean that, or did you mean we?" "I don't know." She met his eyes. "I don't know what I mean. I don't know what I'm doing here anymore, except that leaving seems harder than staying." "You can stay." "Just like that?" "Just like that?" He looked uncomfortable, like the words didn't come easily. "This place needs work. You're good at work. And I'm not good at people anymore. But you don't seem to mind. You're not that bad. You didn't know me before." His expression darkened. "Before my wife died." It was the first time he'd mentioned her directly. Naomi waited, but he didn't elaborate. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything." He stood abruptly, grabbing his bowl. "I'm tired. Going to bed." He left before she could respond. Naomi sat alone at the table, listening to him move around in the bedroom, feeling the conversation's abrupt end like a door slamming. She'd pushed too far, asked too much. Tomorrow he might tell her to leave after all. But when morning came, Cole was already up and working on the corral fence. He didn't mention the previous night, and neither did Naomi. They fell into a rhythm instead, him working on what repairs his strength allowed, her handling everything else. Days became a week. Then 2. The ranch transformed slowly. Fences got mended, the barn got a new door. The garden began producing weak but edible vegetables. Cole's strength returned bit by bit, though he still tired easily and the wound pulled if he moved wrong. They developed routines. Naomi cooked, Cole repaired. She washed clothes, he mended tools. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the desert, not talking much but companionable in the silence. It wasn't easy. Cole had dark moods where he'd disappear for hours, returning with dirt under his nails and a look in his eyes like he'd been somewhere Naomi couldn't follow. She had days when her leg hurt so badly she could barely walk, when frustration made her snap over small things. But they managed. One evening, 3 weeks after Naomi's arrival, Cole broke the silence. "I haven't thanked you properly for saving my life. You thanked me the first day you were coherent. That wasn't proper. That was me half dead and confused." He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with the topic. "I mean it. If you hadn't shown up when you did, I'd be dead. I'd given up. I gathered that from the state of the house." "I'm serious, Naomi." The use of her first name caught her off guard. He usually avoided names entirely, calling her nothing or occasionally the woman when talking about her to himself. "So am I," she said. "You don't owe me anything. We're even. I needed a place. You needed help. It's not even. Not close." He looked out at the desert, at the ranch they'd been rebuilding together. "When Sarah died, my wife, I thought everything died with her. Didn't see the point of keeping going. Let everything fall apart because who cared? Who'd notice if I just stopped?" Naomi stayed quiet, sensing he needed to say this. "Then you showed up. This stranger with a limp and more stubbornness than sense, telling me I was going to eat broth whether I wanted to or not." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Wouldn't let me die. Wouldn't let me quit. Just kept working, kept fixing things, kept acting like this place was worth saving." "It is worth saving. Maybe." He looked at her finally. "Or maybe you're just stubborn enough to make me believe it again." Something shifted between them in that moment. Not romance. It was too soon, too raw for that. But recognition. Two broken people who'd found each other when they'd both hit bottom, who'd somehow managed to pull each other back from the edge. "The town's probably talking," Naomi said quietly, "about me being out here with you." "Let them talk. It could cause trouble." "For who?" Cole's jaw set. "Anyone who's got a problem with you staying can take it up with me. You can't fight the whole town. Watch me." The fierceness in his voice startled her. This wasn't the half-dead man she'd found weeks ago, or even the quiet rancher who'd been slowly recovering. This was someone waking up, coming back to life, finding something worth defending. It terrified her a little, but it also felt like validation, like proof that what she'd done mattered. "I should warn you," Naomi said, trying for lightness. "I'm not planning to leave anytime soon. You're stuck with me." "Good." Cole stood, stretching carefully to avoid pulling his wound, "because this place needs a lot more work, and I'm tired of doing it alone." He headed inside, leaving Naomi on the porch with the sunset and a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The hope lasted exactly 4 weeks. Naomi woke one morning to find they were out of flour, down to the last handful of coffee beans, and completely without salt. The garden was producing, but barely enough to sustain 2 people, and the chickens she'd coaxed back to health laid eggs irregularly at best. They needed supplies, which meant someone had to go into Red Mesa. Cole was at the corral, working on a gate that had been hanging crooked since before Naomi arrived. She watched him for a moment through the kitchen window, noting how much stronger he looked now. The gauntness was gone from his face. He moved with purpose instead of the careful deliberation of someone still healing. She walked outside, her legs stiff from yesterday's work hauling water. The morning air was cool, not yet touched by the sun that would turn everything into an oven by noon. "We need to go into town," she said without preamble. Cole's hand stilled on the gate. "What for?" "Supplies. We're out of almost everything." She ticked items off on her fingers. "Flour, coffee, salt, sugar, nails if you want to keep fixing things, medicine in case that wound acts up again. I can make a list." "I'll go." He went back to working the gate, not looking at her. "You stay here." "Cole," I said, "I'll go." Naomi crossed her arms. "You're planning to avoid Red Mesa forever? Because that's not practical." "I'm planning to avoid it as long as possible." The gate swung free finally, and he tested it, pushing it open and closed. "Anyway, it's better if you're not seen there." "Why?" "Because people might talk?" She kept her voice level, though frustration simmered underneath. They're already talking. You said you didn't care. I don't. But you should. He finally looked at her, and something in his expression was almost gentle. Red Mesa's not kind to women in your position. Woman living alone with a man, no marriage, no chaperone. They'll make assumptions. Let them assume. Naomi. He set down his tools and walked closer. I know you think you can handle whatever they say, but small-town gossip is poison. It'll follow you, make everything harder. And hiding out here makes it better how? Cole didn't have an answer for that. He looked away, jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. I'll come with you, Naomi said firmly. We'll go together, get what we need, and leave. Simple. Nothing simple with you. Is that a complaint? His mouth twitched, almost a smile. More of an observation. They left 2 hours later, taking the wagon Cole had managed to get running despite missing parts, and having wheels that squeaked loud enough to wake the dead. The 5-mile journey felt longer in daylight, with Naomi conscious of every bump that jarred her leg and every stretch of road where silence sat heavy between them. Cole drove with his shoulders tight, hands gripping the reins harder than necessary. Whatever he'd left behind in Red Mesa, it clearly wasn't good memories. When's the last time you went into town? Naomi asked. 1.5 years, maybe 2. That long? Didn't have a reason. Everything I needed I could get delivered or do without. He glanced at her. Turns out I could do without most things. Except basic supplies. Except those. The town appeared on the horizon, shimmering in the heat. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. The last time she'd been here, she'd left broke and desperate, with nowhere to go and no prospects. Now she was returning in a wagon with a man the town had written off as half feral, to buy supplies with money she'd technically earned by working his ranch. The assumptions people would make weren't assumptions at all. They were logical conclusions. They rolled down the main street at mid-morning when traffic was light but witnesses were plentiful. Naomi kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at the platform where Travis Boone had left her standing. But she felt the weight of stairs as they passed the general store, the hotel, the saloon. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop outside the general store. Wait here. No. Naomi, I'm not hiding in the wagon like I'm ashamed. She climbed down before he could argue, ignoring the way her leg protested the drop. I need to pick out some things anyway. You don't know what kind of thread I need. Cole looked like he wanted to argue further, but he just shook his head and followed her inside. The store was dim and crowded with goods. Behind the counter, the same middle-aged man who'd turned Naomi away weeks ago looked up from his ledger. His eyes widened slightly when he recognized her, then went to Cole, and his whole expression shifted into something carefully neutral. Cole Mercer. Been a while. Martin. Cole's voice was flat. Need supplies. Sure. Martin set down his pencil, gaze flicking between them. What can I get you? Naomi stepped forward with her list. 50 pounds of flour, 20 of sugar, 10 of salt, coffee beans, 2 pounds, thread in black and white, nails, assorted sizes, lamp oil, and whatever vegetables you have that aren't half rotten. Martin took the list but didn't look at it. He was too busy staring at Naomi like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. You two, together? He asked, the question trying to sound casual and failing. We're buying supplies together, Naomi said evenly. Is that going to be a problem? No problem. Just surprised to see you back in town, Miss Whitaker. Thought you'd gone back east after... He trailed off meaningfully. After being left on the platform like unwanted baggage? Naomi smiled, showing teeth. No, I'm still here. Turns out the desert suits me. Cole made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Martin looked uncomfortable. Right. Well, let me get these things together. Might take a few minutes. While Martin gathered supplies, other customers filtered in and out. Each one noticed Naomi and Cole, and each one carried the news back outside like currency. Naomi could practically feel the gossip spreading through Red Mesa like wildfire. She was examining thread when she heard the voice. Well, look who crawled back. Travis Boone stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking exactly like he had the day he'd ridden away from her. Handsome in that clean-cut way some men were, with money enough to keep his clothes pressed and his boots shined. He smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. Cole went very still beside her. Boone. Mercer. Travis's smile widened. Heard you died out at that ranch. Guess the rumors were wrong. Guess so. Travis's attention shifted to Naomi. Miss Whitaker, surprising to see you here. Thought you'd have better sense than to stay in a place that didn't want you. The words were designed to cut, and they did. But Naomi had spent weeks rebuilding a ranch and saving a dying man. She'd survived worse than Travis Boone's petty cruelty. Turns out I found somewhere that did want me, she said. Funny how things work out. Travis's eyes narrowed. That's so, and where might that be? The Mercer Ranch. She said it clearly, deliberately. I've been working there the past month. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Martin stopped gathering supplies. The other customer in the store, an older woman Naomi didn't know, gasped audibly. Travis's expression went through several changes, surprise, then calculation, then something ugly. Working there, is that what we're calling it now? Cole moved so fast Naomi barely saw it. One second he was beside her, the next he had Travis by the collar, slammed against the doorframe. Say that again, Cole said, voice deadly quiet. I want to make sure I heard you right. Cole, don't, Naomi started. No. He didn't look away from Travis. He's got something to say. Let him say it plain. Travis's face had gone red. Get your hands off me, Mercer. After you apologized to the lady. For what? Stating facts? Everyone in town's going to think the same thing I am. Woman living alone with a man? No proper arrangement. You know what that makes her. Cole's fist connected with Travis's jaw with a crack that made Naomi wince. Travis staggered back, hand going to his face, eyes watering. Cole! Naomi grabbed his arm. Stop it! He insulted you. I don't care. Fighting him just makes it worse. But the damage was done. Travis straightened, working his jaw, eyes blazing. You're going to regret that, Mercer. I regret not doing it sooner. We'll see how tough you feel when the whole town knows what kind of woman she is, what kind of arrangement you've got going out there. Travis backed toward the door, still holding his jaw. My family practically runs this town. You think anyone's going to want to do business with you after this? After what you've done? I saved his life, Naomi said, voice shaking with anger now. That's what I've done. I cleaned his house and tended his wounds and worked myself half to death, keeping that ranch from falling apart completely. If you or anyone else wants to make something filthy out of that, that's your failing, not mine. Oh, honey, Travis's laugh was cruel. You really think anyone's going to believe that? You're not fooling anyone. He left before Cole could hit him again, the door slamming behind him. In the silence that followed, Naomi became aware of Martin staring at them, and the older woman clutching her basket, and the fact that everything that had just happened would be all over Red Mesa within the hour. I'll get your supplies ready, Martin said quietly, looking at his ledger instead of at them. Might want to take them and go quick, though. Travis's father owns half the businesses in town. This is going to get complicated. Cole's hands were still clenched into fists. Naomi could see the fury radiating off him, barely contained. Come on, she said, touching his arm. Let's just get what we came for and leave. They waited in silence while Martin packed their supplies. Naomi paid with the small amount of money she'd saved from odd jobs at the ranch. Eggs sold to a passing trader, vegetables traded for seed. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, honestly earned, and she refused to feel ashamed of it. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast in small towns. They pretended not to stare while staring anyway, conversations dying as Naomi and Cole loaded the wagon. Is it true? Someone called out. You living out there with him? No marriage? Naomi ignored the question. Cole loaded the last sack of flour with more force than necessary. Shameful, another voice said, an older man this time. Woman your age ought to know better. She knows exactly what she's doing, a woman added. Probably planned it from the start. Get her hooks into a man with property. Cole spun around. Anyone else got something to say? Because I'm happy to discuss it. The crowd fell silent, but the stares remained. Naomi climbed into the wagon, willing her hands not to shake, willing her face to stay neutral. She'd faced humiliation before, on that platform weeks ago. But somehow this was worse. This felt like punishment for daring to survive. They rode out of town in silence, but Naomi could feel eyes following them all the way to the edge of the settlement. A mile out, Cole finally spoke. I'm sorry. For what? For hitting him. For making it worse.
You didn't make it worse. It was already bad. Naomi stared at the road ahead. They were always going to think the worst. That's what people do. They have no right. They have every right to think whatever they want. I can't control that. She looked at him. But I'm not going to hide either. I'm not going to slink around like I've done something wrong when all I did was work hard and keep someone alive. Cole was quiet for a long moment. You're braver than I am.
I'm just tired of being ashamed of things that aren't shameful. They didn't talk the rest of the way back. When the ranch came into view, Naomi felt something loosen in her chest. This place, broken and half-repaired as it was, had become more of a home than anywhere she'd lived in Philadelphia. The house she'd cleaned, the garden she'd planted, the chickens she'd tamed.
But as they unloaded supplies, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The looks in town, the cruel words, Travis Boone's threats about his family's influence, it all added up to trouble coming. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room, the one she'd claimed for herself, separate from Cole's, and stared at the ceiling. Every scenario ran through her mind. The town refusing to sell them supplies, the Boone family making good on threats, Cole's reputation, already damaged, being destroyed completely because he'd taken her in. She could leave, pack her things, walk back to Red Mesa, and figure something else out. It would be the sensible thing to do, the selfless thing. But the thought of leaving made her throat tight and her eyes burn. Somewhere around midnight, she heard Cole moving around in the main room. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her nightgown, and found him sitting at the kitchen table with a half-empty bottle of whiskey. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He looked up, and in the lamplight his eyes were haunted. Thinking. About today? About a lot of things. He poured another measure of whiskey, didn't drink it. I should have handled that better. Should have kept my mouth shut and let him talk. And let him insult me without saying anything? Naomi sat down across from him. That's not who you are. Maybe it should be. Maybe keeping quiet would have been smarter. Smarter doesn't mean better. Cole finally drank the whiskey. They're gonna make your life hell now. You know that, right? Every time you go into town, it'll be the same. Whispers and stares and people acting like you're something dirty. I know. And you're still planning to stay? Naomi met his eyes. Are you planning to make me leave? No, but I'd understand if you wanted to. Well, I don't want to. She said it firmly, meaning it. I like it here. I like the work. I like knowing what I do matters. And I like not being alone. Something in Cole's expression cracked. I like that too. Not being alone. They sat in silence for a while, the lamp burning low between them. Outside, coyotes called in the distance. The wind rattled the shutters Naomi had repaired last week. We could make it official, Cole said suddenly. Get married. That would shut them up. Naomi's heart stuttered. Cole? Not a real marriage. I mean, legal on paper, but just to stop the gossip. We'd keep living like we are, separate rooms, just partners working the ranch. But it would give you protection, respectability. He looked down at the table. You've earned that much. I don't want to be someone's obligation. You're not. He struggled for words. You're the only person who's seen me at my worst and didn't run, who worked beside me without asking for anything. I owe you more than I can repay. If putting my name on you helps, I'll do it. The offer was practical, almost businesslike. But underneath, Naomi heard what he wasn't saying. The loneliness, the gratitude, the slow rebuilding of something human between them. Can I think about it? She asked. Yeah, of course. He stood, taking the bottle with him. I'm going to bed. You should too. After he left, Naomi sat alone with the dying lamp and thought about marriage proposals. She'd imagined them as a girl, romantic declarations, flowers, certainty of love. Not tired whiskey confessions at midnight, not arrangements designed to stop gossip. But maybe romantic fantasies were for women whose lives went according to plan. For women who got swept off their feet by men who didn't ride away when they noticed a limp. Maybe practical arrangements were all some people got. She didn't know if that was enough. The next morning, Naomi woke to voices outside. She dressed quickly and went to the window. 3 men on horseback sat in the yard talking to Cole. She recognized one of them, Silas Boone, Travis's father, a man she'd never met but had heard about. Wealthy rancher,
Influential in Red Mesa politics, someone who expected his word to be law. She grabbed her shawl and went outside. Need to understand the position you're putting yourself in, Silas was saying as she approached. He was older than Travis, with gray in his beard and eyes that calculated everything. My son has a reputation to protect. Your son has a mouth that writes checks his ass can't cash, Cole said flatly. Not my problem. Silas's expression hardened. You assaulted him in front of witnesses. He insulted Miss Whitaker. I responded appropriately.
Miss Whitaker. Silas looked at Naomi like she was something unpleasant he'd found on his boot. The woman living in your house, unchaperoned, doing who knows what. You can understand why people talk. People talk because they have small minds and empty lives, Naomi said, walking to stand beside Cole. Not because there's anything improper happening.
You expect anyone to believe that? A young woman, alone with a man, no family, no oversight? Silas shook his head. Either you're naive or you're lying, and I don't care which. What I care about is you making my son look like a fool. Your son did that himself when he left Miss Whitaker on the platform, Cole said. I just reminded him there are consequences for being cruel. The other two men shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their gun belts. The threat was clear. Naomi felt cold despite the morning heat. This wasn't just about gossip anymore. This was about power, and the Boones being challenged by someone they'd written off years ago. I'm going to make this simple, Silas said. You apologize to Travis publicly. You send this woman back where she came from, and maybe we forget about the assault and let you keep buying supplies in town. And if I don't, then you'll find it very difficult to do business anywhere in this territory. My family has connections. We own half the freight companies, most of the stores. You'll be lucky to buy nails, let alone everything else you need to keep this place running. Cole's jaw worked. Naomi could see him calculating, weighing options. The ranch needed supplies. They couldn't survive on their own indefinitely. But before he could speak, Naomi stepped forward. I'm not going anywhere, she said clearly. Mr. Mercer saved my life when everyone else in Red Mesa turned their backs. I'm staying here and working this ranch as long as he'll have me. And neither you nor your son nor anyone else in this town gets a vote. Silas's eyes went cold. You're making a mistake, girl. I've made plenty of those. I'm good at surviving them. The standoff stretched. Finally, Silas pulled his horse around. You've been warned, both of you. Don't come crying when everything falls apart. They rode off, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. Cole turned to Naomi. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. I'm tired of people making me feel like I should apologize for existing. This is going to make things harder. Things were already hard. She looked at the ranch, at everything they'd built together. We'll figure it out. But as the dust from the Boone's horses settled, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just declared war on people who had all the weapons. The Boones made good on their threats within a week. First, the general store refused to sell them supplies. Martin didn't even try to hide behind excuses. He just shook his head when they walked in and said the Boones had made it clear any business dealings with Cole Mercer would result in consequences he couldn't afford. Then the feed supplier in the next town over turned them away. And the blacksmith. And the man who sold seed for spring planting. Word had spread fast. The Boone family had money and influence that reached beyond Red Mesa, and they were using every bit of it to choke the life out of Cole's ranch. Naomi watched Cole grow quieter with each rejection, watched the tension build in his shoulders until he looked like a man carved from stone. They had enough supplies to last maybe 2 more weeks if they were careful. After that, they'd be subsisting on whatever the garden produced and whatever game Cole could hunt. It wasn't sustainable. They both knew it. We could try the settlement past Canyon Ridge, Naomi suggested one evening as they ate a thin dinner of beans and the last of the bread. It's 2 days' ride, but the Boones might not have reached that far. They have reach everywhere that matters. Cole pushed his food around his plate without eating. Silas Boone didn't build his empire by being careless. He'll have sent word to every supplier within 100 miles. So what do we do? Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he set down his fork and looked at her directly. You leave. Go somewhere the Boone name doesn't matter. Start over where people don't know you. The words hit like a physical blow. You want me gone.
I want you safe. There's a difference. Safe from what? Gossip? I've survived worse than small-town rumors.
This isn't just rumors anymore. Cole's voice was tight with frustration. This is them actively destroying any chance we have of making this work. They're going to starve us out, Naomi, and when they do, you'll be the one who suffers most. We'll both suffer. I'm used to it. You're not.
Naomi laughed, sharp and bitter. You think I'm not used to suffering? I spent 24 years being pitied and dismissed because of this leg. I know what it's like to be considered less than whole. This? She gestured at the sparse table, the bare pantry, the ranch slowly being strangled by the Boone's influence. This is just a different kind of the same fight. It's not your fight. The hell it isn't. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I chose to stay here. I chose to work this ranch. That makes it my fight just as much as yours. Cole stood too, and for a moment they faced each other across the table, both stubborn, both scared, both refusing to admit how bad things had gotten. I don't want to see you destroyed because of me, Cole said quietly. Then don't give up. Naomi softened her voice. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too. But she didn't know if she believed it. The breaking point came 3 days later, when Naomi walked to the main road to meet a traveling peddler Cole had flagged down. She needed thread, desperately. Her last dress had torn, and she'd been mending it with scraps, but the fabric was giving out. The peddler took one look at her and shook his head. Sorry, miss. Can't do business with anyone from the Mercer place. Got word from the Boone family that anyone who does will be cut off from their suppliers. I can't afford that kind of trouble. It's just thread, Naomi said, trying to keep her voice level. Surely that's not worth that. Everything's worth something when the Boones say it is. He tipped his hat, almost apologetic. You seem like a decent woman, but decent doesn't pay my bills. He drove on, leaving Naomi standing in the road with her torn dress and her dwindling options. That night, she made a decision. She waited until Cole was asleep, then carefully packed her few belongings into her carpet bag, the same one she'd carried from Philadelphia all those weeks ago. She left a note on the kitchen table, weighted down with a coffee cup. Cole, I'm not giving up. I'm going to fix this. Trust me. N. Then she walked out into the darkness, her bad leg protesting every step, and started the 5-mile journey back to Red Mesa. She arrived just before dawn, exhausted and limping badly. The town was still mostly asleep, but lights burned in a few windows. The bakery, the hotel, people starting their early routines. Naomi went straight to Mrs. Chen's boarding house and knocked until the older woman answered, wrapped in a robe and scowling. Miss Whitaker, I heard you were living in sin with Cole Mercer. I'm living at his ranch, working for my keep. Nothing sinful about it. Naomi met her eyes. I need a room, just for tonight. Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. Same room as before. $1 for the night. Naomi paid with one of her last coins and climbed the stairs to the familiar small room. She didn't sleep, couldn't, with what she was planning. Instead, she washed her face, changed into her least worn dress, and pinned her hair carefully. Then she sat on the bed and waited for the town to wake up. At 8 o'clock, she went downstairs and asked Mrs. Chen a single question. When's the next town gathering? Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow. The harvest social is tonight, at the community hall? Why? I need to borrow something, a nice dress if you have one, and I need to know if you'd be willing to vouch for my character. Mrs. Chen's expression was unreadable. That's a dangerous thing to ask, given how the Boones feel about you. I know. That's why I'm asking if you're willing, not assuming you are. The older woman was quiet, considering. Then she said, I've run this boarding house for 20 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of women come through here. Some running from something, some running toward something. You're the first one I've seen who stood her ground when she had every reason to run. Is that a yes? That's a maybe. Depends on what you're planning to do. I'm planning to tell the truth, in front of everyone. Naomi's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I'm planning to make the Boones look me in the eye while they spread their lies. Mrs. Chen smiled, sharp and approving. I have a blue dress that might fit you. And yes, I'll vouch for your character. This should be interesting. The Harvest Social was Red Mesa's biggest event of the season.
a chance for ranchers and townspeople to celebrate the end of summer, trade stories, and conduct the social politics that kept small towns running. Everyone would be there, including the Boone family. Naomi spent the day preparing. She helped Mrs. Chen with chores to earn her keep, then bathed carefully and dressed in the borrowed blue dress. It was finer than anything she owned, made of good fabric that didn't show every stain and wrinkle. Mrs. Chen even lent her a shawl and a decent pair of shoes. "You clean up well," Mrs. Chen said, studying her. "Now remember, hold your head high. Don't apologize for anything. The moment you look ashamed, you've lost." "I'm not ashamed." "Good. Keep that fire. You'll need it." They arrived at the community hall just after sunset. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over tables laden with food and people in their best clothes mingling and laughing. A fiddle player was tuning up in the corner. Children ran between adults' legs, excited to be up past bedtime. Conversations died as Naomi entered. She felt every eye turn toward her, felt the weight of judgment and curiosity and condemnation. But she kept walking, Mrs. Chen beside her, until they reached the refreshment table. "Naomi Whitaker," someone whispered. "What is she doing here?" Nerve of her, showing her face after, "Shh, she'll hear you." Naomi poured herself a cup of punch with steady hands, took a sip, and turned to survey the room. She spotted the Boone family immediately. Silas in his expensive suit, his wife beside him in silk, and Travis looking smug as he talked to a group of young ranchers. Travis saw her at the same moment. His expression shifted from smug to surprised to angry in rapid succession. He said something to his companions and started walking toward her. "Miss Whitaker," his voice carried across the room, making more people turn and stare. "I'm surprised to see you here. Didn't think you'd show your face in polite company." "Why wouldn't I?" Naomi kept her voice pleasant. "I'm a resident of Red Mesa, just like you." "Are you? Because from what I hear, you're living 5 miles outside town, doing work that would make any decent woman blush." The room had gone completely quiet now. Even the fiddle player had stopped tuning. "I'm working a ranch," Naomi said clearly. "Cooking, cleaning, tending livestock, mending fences. The same work ranch wives do every day. The only difference is I'm not married to the man whose land I'm working." "That's a pretty big difference," Travis said, smiling like he'd won something. "Makes people wonder what else you're doing out there." "Let them wonder. Wondering isn't knowing." "Everyone knows, honey. They're just too polite to say it to your face." "Then maybe you should be more specific." Naomi stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Say exactly what you're accusing me of, in front of all these witnesses." Travis's smile faltered slightly. Accusing someone obliquely was one thing. Making the accusation explicit in front of the whole town was another. "I'm saying you're living with a man unwed. I'm saying no proper woman would put herself in that position, and I'm saying everyone here knows what that makes you." "A survivor?" Naomi's voice was getting louder now, emotion bleeding through her control. "A woman who was left standing on a train platform by a coward who couldn't handle anything less than perfection? A woman who had to choose between starving in town or working on a ranch? You could have gone back east. With what money? You rode away without a word, without even the decency to tell me to my face why I wasn't good enough. You left me with $7 and no prospects in a town where no one would hire me because of this." She slapped her bad leg, and several people flinched. "So yes, I went to work for Cole Mercer. I saved his life. I rebuilt his house. I've worked harder in the past 2 months than you've probably worked in your entire pampered life. And if you or anyone else wants to make something filthy out of that, that says everything about you and nothing about me." The silence was absolute. Travis's face had gone red, his jaw clenched. "You think you're better than everyone here?" he said, voice shaking with anger. "You think working a ranch makes you special? You're nothing. You're a crippled woman who latched onto the first man desperate enough to—" "That's enough." The voice came from the doorway. Every head turned. Cole stood there, still wearing his work clothes, dusty from riding hard. His eyes were locked on Travis with an intensity that made several people step back. "Cole," Naomi's heart stuttered. "What are you doing here?" "I woke up and found your note." He walked into the room, and people parted for him like water around stone. "Figured you were about to do something stupid and stubborn."
I had a plan.
It's. I know. Let them tear you apart while you stand there and take it. He stopped beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched.
That's a terrible plan.
I was handling it. I can see that. He looked at Travis. But you shouldn't have to handle it alone. Travis straightened, trying to regain his composure. Well, isn't this touching? The crazy hermit comes to defend his whore. Cole moved faster than Naomi could process. One moment Travis was talking, the next he was on the floor with Cole standing over him, fist cocked for another blow. Don't. Cole's voice was deadly quiet. Don't ever use that word about her again. Silas Boone pushed through the crowd. That's assault. Everyone here is a witness. Everyone here is a witness to your son running his mouth, Cole said, not taking his eyes off Travis. I'm just correcting his vocabulary. You can't.
I can, and I did. Cole finally looked up, scanning the crowd.
Anyone else have something they want to say about Miss Whitaker? Now's your chance. Say it to my face. Nobody spoke. The room held its breath. Cole reached down and hauled Naomi to her feet. She hadn't realized she'd been shaking until he steadied her. Then he addressed the crowd, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Most of you know me. Know I lost my wife. Know I let everything go to hell after Sarah died. His voice cracked slightly on her name. I stopped caring about the ranch, about the town, about myself. I would have died out there if Naomi hadn't shown up. She found me half dead from infection, and instead of leaving me to rot like I deserved, she saved my life. He turned slightly, including Naomi in his words. She spent weeks nursing me back to health, cleaned my filthy house, fixed fences I'd let fall apart, brought life back to a place that was dying. And she did it all while dealing with a leg that causes her pain every single day. Pain she never complains about, never uses as an excuse to do less than her absolute best. Cole's gaze swept the room again. Some of you are standing here judging her because she's living at my ranch without a marriage certificate. You want to know why we're not married? Because I haven't earned the right to ask her. Because she's worth 10 of me, and I know it. She crossed a desert to save a stranger when everyone in this town had written me off as good as dead. She works harder with one good leg than most people here work with two. And the only thing shameful about any of this is that you're all standing here listening to the Boones tell you what to think, instead of using your own eyes to see who she really is. Travis was climbing to his feet, but Silas put a hand on his shoulder, holding him back. The older Boone's expression was calculating, dangerous. Beautiful speech, Mercer, Silas said. But speeches don't change facts. The fact is you have an unmarried woman living in your house. The fact is this makes both of you look improper. And the fact is we have every right to refuse business with someone who flaunts social conventions. Social conventions. Cole's laugh was bitter. You mean the same social conventions that let your son humiliate a woman on a train platform? That let half the people in this room turn their backs on someone who needed help? Those conventions. We live in a civilized society. Civilization means treating people with decency. It means not punishing someone for surviving when the odds were stacked against them. Cole's voice rose. Naomi didn't do anything wrong. The only crime here is how she's been treated. By your son. By this town. By every single person who looked at her leg and decided she wasn't worth their time. He turned back to the crowd, and Naomi saw something she'd never seen before in Cole Mercer's face. Passion, conviction, the fire of someone who'd found something worth fighting for. I'm going to tell you all something, and you can believe it or not, Cole said. Naomi Whitaker is the most decent person I've ever met. She's brave and stubborn and harder working than anyone I know. She saved my life and my ranch when she could have walked away a dozen times. And if you want to judge her for that, fine, judge away. But you're going to have to judge me too, because I'm not letting her face this alone. The room was silent. Naomi could feel tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. Then, from the back of the room, a woman's voice spoke up. I think you're all being ridiculous. Ruth, the saloon woman who'd told Naomi about Cole's ranch in the first place, stepped forward. She looked different than Naomi remembered, cleaned up, wearing a respectable dress, her red hair pinned neatly. I sent Naomi to the Mercer Ranch, Ruth said, when she was desperate and had nowhere else to go. I told her Cole might need help and that if she was brave enough to try, it might work out. Looks like I was right. She looked around the room challengingly. Anyone here have a problem with that? Mrs. Chen stepped forward next. Miss Whitaker stayed at my boarding house before going to work for Mr. Mercer. In that time, she was respectful, paid her bills, and caused no trouble. She came back last night to borrow a dress for this social, and she told me exactly what she planned to do. Stand up for herself. I respect that. A murmur ran through the crowd. Then the old man who'd given Naomi directions weeks ago spoke up. I met the girl on the road the day Boone left her stranded. She had more dignity in her little finger than some folks have in their whole body. One by one, people began speaking. Not everyone. Plenty stayed silent, unwilling to cross the Boones. But enough. Enough to make it clear that Naomi wasn't completely without allies. Silas Boone's face had gone rigid. This is absurd. You're all letting sentiment cloud your judgment. No, Cole interrupted. We're finally seeing clearly. You've spent years using your money and influence to control this town, but you can't control what people think. You can't make them hate someone who doesn't deserve it just because you say so. You'll regret this, Silas said coldly. Both of you. My family. Your family has done enough damage. Cole took Naomi's hand, the first time he'd ever done so in public. We're leaving. Anyone who wants to do business with us in the future, you know where to find us. Anyone who doesn't, that's fine too. We'll manage. He started toward the door, Naomi beside him, her hand tight in his. The crowd parted silently. They were almost at the exit when Travis called out, You think this changes anything? You think one speech makes everyone forget what she is? Cole stopped, turned back. What she is, he said clearly, is the woman who gave me a reason to start living again. And that's worth more than your opinion or your family's money or anything else you've got. Then they walked out into the night, leaving the harvest social and the whispers and the Boone's fury behind. Outside, the cool air hit Naomi's face like a blessing. She realized she was shaking, adrenaline and emotion finally catching up with her. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. Cole was still holding her hand. I should have done it sooner. Should have stood up for you the first time someone said something cruel. You hit Travis twice. That counts for something. He almost smiled. Fair point. They stood there in the darkness, music and voices drifting from the hall behind them. Naomi's leg throbbed from standing so long, and her heart still raced from the confrontation. But something had shifted, something fundamental. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home. Work the ranch. Figure out how to survive without the Boone's blessing. Cole looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. Together. Together, Naomi repeated. The word felt like a promise, like a foundation, like something worth building a future on, even if that future was uncertain and difficult and nothing like what either of them had planned. They started walking toward where Cole had left his horse, and Naomi realized she was smiling. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. Not because the town's opinion had completely changed, it hadn't, but because for the first time since arriving in Red Mesa, she wasn't facing the world alone. She had someone who saw her worth, who fought for her, who made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be fought for. And that was enough. They rode back to the ranch in silence, Naomi sitting behind Cole on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. The desert stretched endlessly under a sky so thick with stars, it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. Her bad leg ached from being pressed against the horse's flank, but she didn't complain. The pain felt distant compared to everything else churning inside her. What had just happened at the harvest social felt surreal. The confrontation, Cole's speech, the way some people had actually stood up for her. It was more than she'd expected and less than she'd hoped for, all tangled together into something she couldn't quite process yet. When the ranch came into view, lit only by moonlight, Naomi felt something loosen in her chest. This place, these buildings she'd scrubbed clean, fences she'd helped mend, gardens she'd planted with her own blistered hands. It looked small and shabby compared to the grand ranches owned by families like the Boones. But it was real. It was hers in a way nothing had ever been before. Cole helped her down from the horse, his hand steadying her until her feet found solid ground. Her leg nearly buckled. It always did after being in one position too long, but she caught herself against the horse's side. You okay? Cole asked. Just stiff. She stepped back, testing her weight. I'm fine. He led the horse to the barn while Naomi walked slowly toward the house. Inside, she lit the lamp with shaking hands and sank into a chair at the kitchen table. The note she'd left was still there, her handwriting looking too confident for someone who'd been terrified when she wrote it. Cole came in a few minutes later, closing the door against the night chill. He stood there for a moment, backlit by the lamp, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen him. "That was stupid," he said finally. "What you did. Going into town alone like that. Probably. You could have been hurt. Travis could have—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "You should have woken me up. We could have figured something out together. I needed to face them myself." Naomi looked at him directly. "I've spent my whole life having other people decide what I could or couldn't handle because of this leg. I wasn't going to let you do the same thing, even if you meant well." Cole pulled out the other chair and sat heavily. "I wasn't trying to protect you because of your leg. I was trying to protect you because I—" He trailed off, searching for words. "Because you matter, to me. And the thought of something happening to you makes me feel things I haven't felt since Sarah died." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs. "What kind of things?" she asked quietly. "Scared? Angry? Protective?" He looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred from years of ranch work. Alive, maybe. Like there's something worth waking up for besides just surviving another day. Naomi reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. His skin was rough against her palm, warm and solid and real. "I feel that too," she said. "I didn't expect to. When I came here, I just wanted somewhere to exist, somewhere I wouldn't starve or freeze. But this place, this ranch, working beside you, it became more than survival. It became living." Cole turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture was simple, but it felt momentous. "I meant what I said at the social," he told her. "You're worth 10 of me. I don't deserve—" "Stop." Naomi squeezed his hand. "You saved me too. Maybe not from infection, but from giving up. From believing I was only worth what other people decided I was worth. That's just as important." They sat like that for a long while, hands joined across the table, the lamp burning low between them. Outside, coyotes called in the distance. The wind rattled the shutters, normal night sounds that had become familiar, comforting. "What do we do now?" Cole asked eventually. "The Boones aren't going to let this go. Tonight probably made things worse. Maybe. Or maybe we showed them they don't control everything." Naomi pulled her hand back, immediately missing the warmth. "We'll figure it out. We figured out everything else. We're almost out of supplies. No money to buy more, and nobody willing to sell to us anyway. Then we get creative, hunt more, expand the garden, trade with people outside the Boone's influence." She stood, her leg protesting after sitting too long. "We're not the first people to face this kind of thing. Others have survived. So will we." Cole looked at her with something like wonder. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point?" He stood too, moving closer. They were only a few feet apart now, close enough that Naomi could see the gray threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes from squinting into too many sunrises, the scar on his chin she'd never asked about. "The offer still stands," he said. "Getting married, making it official. It wouldn't solve the supply problem, but it might make some people easier on you." "I don't want to marry you to make other people comfortable." "What would you want to marry me for?" The question caught her off guard. She thought about it, really thought, while Cole waited with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Because you see me," she said finally. "Not the limp, not what I can't do, but who I actually am. Because you let me work beside you without trying to coddle me or limit me. Because you're honest, even when honesty is hard." She paused. "And because I think I could love you, given time. Maybe I already do, a little." Cole's breath caught. "Naomi, but I won't marry you out of convenience or obligation," she continued firmly. "If we do this, it has to be real. A partnership. Not you rescuing me or me rescuing you, but both of us choosing this life together. That's what I want too." He stepped closer, close enough to touch if either of them moved. "I don't know how to do this. Haven't courted anyone since Sarah. Don't even know if I remember how." "We'll figure it out." Naomi smiled slightly. "We seem to be good at figuring things out." Cole reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered at her temple,
gentle in a way that made her throat tight. "I'd like to try," he said, "doing this right. Taking our time. Building something real instead of just surviving together." "I'd like that too." They stood there for another moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Cole stepped back, breaking the tension. "You should sleep. It's late, and tomorrow's going to be hard. They always are." Naomi nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the confrontation had finally worn off, leaving her wrung out and shaky. "Good night, Cole." "Good night." She made it to her small room before her leg gave out completely. She collapsed on the bed, still wearing Mrs. Chen's borrowed dress, too tired to change, and fell asleep with Cole's words echoing in her mind. "I think I could love you. Maybe I already do." Morning came too early, announced by roosters and the relentless Arizona sun. Naomi woke stiff and sore, her leg throbbing from yesterday's exertion. She changed into her work dress, splashed water on her face, and limped into the kitchen to find Cole already up, making coffee. "Morning," he said, glancing at her. "How's the leg?" "Awful, but it'll loosen up once I start moving." She accepted the coffee cup he offered. "What's the plan for today?" "I'm going to ride out to the north pasture, check the fence line. You?" "Laundry, mending. The garden needs weeding." She sipped the bitter coffee, grimacing. "We're out of sugar. Add it to the list of things we're out of." They worked separately through the morning, falling into familiar routines, but something had shifted between them. Naomi caught Cole watching her while she hung laundry, his expression unguarded. She found herself smiling at nothing while pulling weeds, remembering the way his fingers had felt in her hair. It was tentative, fragile, new, but it was real. Around noon, a wagon appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Naomi's stomach clenched. Visitors usually meant trouble, but as it got closer, she recognized the driver. Ruth, the saloon woman who'd spoken up at the social. Cole emerged from the barn, hand resting on his rifle. He relaxed slightly when he saw who it was, but didn't put the weapon down. Ruth pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, surprisingly nimble despite her skirts. "Morning. Brought you some things." "Things?" Naomi approached cautiously. "Supplies, flour, coffee, salt, sugar, some fabric I thought you might need." Ruth gestured to the wagon bed, which was indeed loaded with goods. "Figured you'd be running low after the Boones cut you off." Naomi stared. "We can't pay for this." "Didn't ask you to. Consider it a gift." "Ruth, that's too much." "It's not for me." Ruth crossed her arms. "After you two left the social last night, some of us stayed and talked. Turns out not everyone in Red Mesa is content letting the Boones dictate who deserves help and who doesn't. We took up a collection. Mrs. Chen contributed. That old man who gave you directions weeks ago. Even Martin from the general store, though he made us promise not to tell anyone." Cole had gone very still. "Why would they do that?" "Because your speech made people think." Ruth looked between them. "Made them remember that this town used to take care of its own. Made them realize they'd been letting money and fear make their decisions instead of their own conscience." Naomi felt tears threatening. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just take the supplies and keep doing what you're doing." Ruth started unloading sacks of flour. "Oh, and Mrs. Chen sent your dress back cleaned and pressed. Said to tell you it looked better on you anyway." They spent the next 20 minutes unloading the wagon. The supplies weren't enough to last forever, but they were enough to get through the next few months if rationed carefully. More importantly, they were proof that Naomi and Cole weren't completely alone. Before Ruth left, she pulled Naomi aside. "I heard what you said last night, about survival, about working hard, about not letting people define you by your limitations." She paused. "I needed to hear that too. We all did. I was just telling the truth. Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do." Ruth squeezed her hand. "You've got more people on your side than you think. Don't forget that." After Ruth left, Cole and Naomi stood in the yard surrounded by supplies they hadn't dared hope for, looking at each other with something like disbelief. "We're not alone," Naomi said softly. "No, we're not." Cole smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Guess we better make this work then. Can't let those people down." "Guess not." They worked the rest of the day with renewed energy, stocking the pantry, organizing the supplies, planning how to stretch everything as far as possible.
That evening, Cole disappeared while Naomi was making dinner. He returned an hour later carrying wildflowers he'd picked from the hills beyond the ranch. "These are for you," he said, awkward and uncertain. "Sarah used to like wildflowers. Thought maybe you would too." Naomi took them, touched by the gesture despite its clumsy presentation. "They're beautiful, thank you. I'm not good at this, courting, romance." "Neither am I." She found a jar to use as a vase, filled it with water, and arranged the flowers carefully. "We'll learn together." Over the following weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Cole started teaching Naomi to ride, patient with her fear and her legs' limitations. She taught him to cook things that weren't just meat and beans. They worked side by side during the day and sat together on the porch at night, talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her about Sarah, finally, how they'd met, how she'd died in childbirth along with their baby, how grief had swallowed him whole until Naomi pulled him back out. It hurt him to talk about it. Naomi could see that. But he needed to say it, and she needed to hear it, to understand the man he'd been, the man he was becoming. Naomi told him about Philadelphia, about her aunt who'd raised her after her parents died, about the fever that damaged her leg when she was 6, and the years of doctors who promised cures that never came, about the men who'd courted her briefly before noticing her limp, and how each rejection had carved away a little more of her belief that she deserved to be loved. "Travis Boone wasn't the first person to leave me," she admitted one evening. "He was just the most public about it." Cole's arm was around her shoulders, a recent development that still felt new enough to make her heart race. "Their loss. Every single one of them. You have to say that. You're courting me." "I'm saying it because it's true." He pulled her closer. "You're the strongest person I know, Naomi. That leg doesn't make you less. If anything, it makes you more. Because you've had to fight for everything, and you never stopped fighting. Sometimes I wanted to stop, but you didn't. That's what matters." Supply runs became easier as word spread about the Harvest social confrontation. Not every store would sell to them. The Boone's influence was real, but enough did. People who'd stayed silent before started nodding greetings when they passed. A few even stopped to talk. The Boones themselves stayed away, but their presence lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Travis was rarely seen in town anymore. Rumors said his father had sent him to oversee a ranch in New Mexico, punishment for embarrassing the family. Silas himself grew colder, more calculating, watching and waiting for his opportunity to strike back. "They're not done with us," Cole warned one day as they rode back from town with fresh supplies. "Silas Boone doesn't forgive people who make him look weak. Let him try something. We'll handle it. You're getting cocky. I'm getting confident. There's a difference." Cole laughed, the sound still surprising even after weeks of hearing it more often. "When this is over, if it's ever over, remind me never to underestimate you again." "I plan to." 3 months after the Harvest social, Cole took Naomi to the ridge overlooking the ranch at sunset. They rode together on his horse, Naomi's arms around his waist, comfortable now with the rhythm of the animal's gait and the warmth of Cole's body against hers. The ridge offered a view of everything they'd built together. The house with its repaired roof and clean windows, the barn with its new door, the garden, still producing despite the cooling weather, the fences, mended and strong. The few head of cattle Cole had managed to acquire through careful trading. It wasn't much by most standards, but it was theirs. Cole helped her down and they stood together, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. "I never thought I'd care about this place again," Cole said quietly. "After Sarah died, it was just a reminder of everything I'd lost. But you changed that. You made it feel like home again." Naomi leaned against him, letting him take some of her weight. Her leg always hurt worse at the end of the day, but she'd learned to accept the pain as part of who she was. "You did the same for me. Gave me a place to belong when I thought I'd never belong anywhere." "Naomi," he turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I know we said we'd take our time, build this slow and make sure it was real, but I'm sure. I've been sure for weeks now." Her heart stuttered. "Cole, I'm not good with words. Never have been. And I can't offer you luxury or an easy life. This ranch will always be hard work. The town will probably always have people who judge us. Money's always going to be tight." He paused, searching her face. "But I can offer you honesty. partnership, a home we build together, side by side, and love. I can offer you that too because I do love you, more than I thought I'd ever love anyone again. Naomi's eyes burned with tears she didn't try to hide. That's more than enough. That's everything. Then marry me. Not because of gossip or convenience or pressure. Marry me because we choose this, choose each other. She wanted to say yes immediately, but years of disappointment made her careful. Are you sure? Really sure? Because my leg isn't going to get better. There will be days I can barely walk, days I can't do the work that needs doing, days I'm going to be a burden. Stop. Cole cupped her face in his hands. You're never a burden. On your worst days, you accomplish more than most people do on their best. Your leg is part of you, and I love all of you, every stubborn, brave, incredible part. The tears spilled over. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, gentle and careful and full of promise. Naomi kissed him back, tasting salt from her tears and feeling something settle deep in her chest. Home, safety, belonging. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. We'll do it simple, he said. No big ceremony, just something real. I don't need big. I just need you. They were married 2 weeks later in the small room Mrs. Chen kept for private gatherings. The ceremony was witnessed by Ruth, Mrs. Chen, the old man who'd given Naomi directions that first day, and Martin from the general store. It lasted maybe 10 minutes, simple vows spoken without flourish. But when Cole slipped a plain gold band on Naomi's finger, his mother's ring, he'd told her, the only valuable thing he owned, she felt the weight of it like an anchor, like proof that this was real, that someone had chosen her not despite her flaws, but including them. The small gathering celebrated afterward with cake Mrs. Chen had made and coffee that was actually decent for once. People congratulated them with genuine warmth, and Naomi felt something she'd rarely experienced in her life. Acceptance. Not tolerance. Not pity. Actual acceptance of who she was and what she'd become. That night, back at the ranch, Cole carried her over the threshold despite her protests about her weight and his recently healed wound. He set her down gently in the main room, and they looked at each other, suddenly uncertain. I don't know how to do this, Cole admitted. It's been so long since... We'll figure it out. Naomi took his hand. Like we figure everything else out. They did figure it out, slowly and carefully and with more laughter than Naomi expected. Cole was gentle with her, mindful of her leg, patient when she needed to adjust or rest. And when they finally came together, it felt right, like two broken pieces that fit together better for having been shattered first. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Cole's arm around her and her head on his chest, Naomi felt peace settle over her like a blanket. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. For choosing me. For making me believe I deserve to be chosen. Cole pressed a kiss to her forehead. Thank you for saving my life, both literally and in every other way that matters. Winter came hard that year. The Boones made one last attempt to ruin them, pressuring the bank to call in loans on Cole's ranch. But the same people who'd contributed supplies rallied again, helping Cole restructure his debt and buy time to make payments. The message was clear. Red Mesa was changing. The Boones' influence was waning as people remembered what community was supposed to mean. Spring brought new challenges, drought, a sick cow, fences damaged by wind. But Naomi and Cole faced each one together, learning as they went, making mistakes and fixing them, building something solid from nothing. One evening, nearly a year after Naomi had first arrived at the ranch, she stood in the garden she'd expanded, looking at neat rows of vegetables and herbs. Her hands were dirty, her back ached, and her bad leg throbbed from hours of work. But she was smiling. Cole found her there as the sun set, wrapping his arms around her from behind. What are you grinning about? I was just thinking. When I stepped off that train, I thought my life was over. I thought Travis riding away was the worst thing that could happen to me. She leaned back against him. Turns out, it was the best thing. Because it led me here. To you. To this life we've built. You don't regret it? The hardship? The gossip? The constant struggle? Not for a second. She turned in his arms to face him. This life isn't easy. But it's real. It's mine. That's worth more than anything else. Cole kissed her, soft and sweet, and Naomi kissed him back with everything she had. Around them, the ranch hummed with evening sounds, chickens settling for the night, cattle lowing in the distance, wind through the new leaves on the garden plants. It wasn't perfect. They still struggled with money. The town still had people who whispered. Naomi's legs still caused her pain. Cole still had dark days when grief for Sarah surfaced unexpectedly. But they had each other. They had this place they'd rebuilt from ruins. They had people who'd chosen to stand by them when it mattered. And they had something neither of them had truly believed possible before. A future built on honesty, hard work, and love earned through choosing each other every single day. That night, sitting on the porch under a sky full of stars, Naomi thought about the woman who'd stood on that train platform months ago, lost, humiliated, convinced she was unwanted. She wanted to tell that woman what she knew now, that being left behind wasn't the end, that sometimes the people who reject you are doing you a favor, clearing the path for something better. That worth isn't determined by what others think, but by what you know to be true about yourself. That a bad leg doesn't make you less. That surviving makes you strong. That choosing to keep fighting, keep working, keep believing you deserve good things, that's where real courage lives.
"What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Just how far we've come," Naomi said. "How different everything is from what I expected." "Better or worse?" She squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own, proof of work shared and a life built together. "Better. So much better than I ever imagined possible."
They sat there until the stars wheeled overhead and the moon rose high, two people who'd found each other when they'd both given up hope. Two people who'd learned that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones. That sometimes being unwanted by the wrong person opens the door to being cherished by the right one. And in the morning, they'd wake up and do it all again. Tend the ranch, face whatever challenges came. Build their life together one difficult, beautiful day at a time. Because that's what love was, in the end. Not grand gestures or easy promises, but the daily choice to show up, work hard, and believe that what you were building together was worth every sacrifice. Naomi had crossed a desert to save a dying stranger. In return, he'd saved her right back. And together, they'd built something neither could have managed alone. A home, a partnership, a life worth living. That was more than enough. That was everything.